Hello, everybody. Welcome to Class 41. Today, we're going to be discussing dangerous sports, or sometimes known as extreme sports, and we will be starting it off now. Thank you for listening.
American football. Football may not sound dangerous because of all the gear that is necessary for football. The biggest reasons are the concussions. Helmet don't necessarily eliminate concussions. Helmet rather gives you a false sense of security. Concussions are brain injuries caused by the impact of an object. Football injuries related to the brain happen about every 6 games. The amount of NFL players that sustain concussions is the average of 242.
Sorry, Alligator Wrestling by Ellie Song. Alligator wrestling is an attraction that later evolved into a sport that began as hunting expeditions by Native Americans. It has been described as alligator capturing techniques. It's as its name implies. The athlete tries to wrestle an alligator and try not to die in the process, and that's pretty much it. The origins of it that I could have traced back is when southern natives hunted alligators as a food source for like a long time, and they later utilized this ability to perform shows for spectators and earn a living off of it. So that's kind of cool. A common symbol of Florida in popular culture is the American alligator. The St. Augustine Alligator Farm was one of Florida's earliest themed tourist attractions that opened for business in 1893. At this farm, I was supposed to put alligator wrestling and other tourist attractions. Sorry, yeah. Wait, no, St. Augustine Alligator Farm and other tourist attractions such as Gatorland and Silver Springs Nature Park feature alligator wrestling, and it's one of the most common spectator activity for people to do in Florida, and it's most common near the Everglades due to the nicknamed Alligator Alley, having an abundance of alligator. Some people do it for fun, some people just do it for the sport. And that's it.
Participating in motorbike racing is one of the most dangerous activities you could do. In motorbike racing, there's not a vehicle surrounding you to physically protect you like in car racing. In these races, the motorbikes often reaches an average speed of 120 miles per hour. One of the highest speed reached was 222 miles per hour in the Red Bull Grand Prix of the Americas in Austin, Texas. The Al Mantours Trophy race is an annual motorbike race that is often considered the deadliest race in the world. There were a total of 260 fatalities with 150 official matches. In the 1970 Ironman TT race alone, there were 6 fatalities.
My name is Joshua Wei, and I did gymnastics. And gymnastics is a sport requiring balance, strength, flexibility, agility, coordination, and endurance. And in simpler terms, it's pretty much just moving your body around, doing acrobatic performances. And it is extremely dangerous, and the amount of injuries is immense. The main injuries you see are injuries with shoulder down and legs down. And the most common one you usually see is an injury of the ACL or your ankles. And a somewhat good example of an injury / death is Melanie Coleman, who was a college gymnast that died due to spinal cord injury during a practice session.
Hi, I'm Juliana, and I'm going to be talking about base jumping. So base jumping is the recreational sport of jumping from a fixed object, and base stands for buildings, antennae, spans, and earth. And spans are also the bridges, and earths are cliffs, and these are like the things that people would jump off of. People use a parachute to help themselves land safely, but because they can only carry one parachute per person, compared to skydiving, it is really, really dangerous. And it also results in a lot of injuries and deaths. Injuries are around 0.2% to 0.4% of a chance, and deaths are 0.0% per jump or 1.7% per participant per year.
Freediving. Freediving is diving as deep as you can without using any equipment. Divers go deep under the water and experience being part of the ocean itself. And they say that being so deep underwater while holding their breath gives them a unique feeling and say it's like being outer space. But not having oxygen running through your body can also lead to physiological changes, which can lead to death. Professional freedivers can go down over 100 meters and hold their breath for over 10 minutes. Unlike scuba diving, freedivers simply take a deep breath and dive down. Good divers usually go at least 400 feet, the equivalent of a 40-story tall building. They push their bodies to the limit and their heart rates go down to as low as 40 beats a minute, while their lungs shrink and their blood surges to the heart and the brain. The current world record is held by Herbert Nitsch, who dived down to 702 feet. Freediving is a dangerous and sometimes deadly sport. There are about 5,000 freedivers around the world, and an estimated 100 die each year. Freedivers can black out from the lack of oxygen while dying underwater, which can often lead to death. It's an unwritten rule for freedivers to always dive with a partner. It's not very dangerous for people just doing it for fun, but for top divers, it's not uncommon for accidents to happen.
Helicopter skiing by me. Helicopter skiing, otherwise known as heli skiing, is an extreme sport that is accessed by a helicopter. It's typically an off-trail downhill skiing that is dangerous because there's a risk of avalanches potentially occurring and killing you in its wake. However, it isn't that common for avalanches to occur, but it does happen, so be careful out there. Hans Moser started heli skiing in 1965 in British Columbia. If you are relatively good at skiing, which no offense intended, I doubt you are, but if you are, try out heli skiing sometime. You probably have fun. Just don't die of an avalanche.
I'm Gavin and I did wingsuit flying. Wingsuit flying is the sport of flying through the air using a wingsuit. It was invented in the late 1990s by Patrick de Gaillardin of France. The average speed of a wingsuit is 100 miles per hour and the world's fastest is 249 miles per hour, also known as 400 kilometers per hour. This is faster than the world's fastest bullet train, which goes up to 224 miles per hour. There have been 330 deaths while wingsuit flying, and it's calculated there's approximately 1 death per every 500 jumps.
Hello, I'll be presenting bull riding. Bull riding is often considered an awfully dangerous rodeo sport where the participant must ride a bucking bull with one hand and stay mounted on top of it for a total of 8 seconds while the bull is trying to buck off the rider. This time process is necessary to receive a score from the judges. Basically, the largest rodeo organization in the world is the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. So most organizations follow scoring regulations similar to the PRCA. According to the common rules, the rider will only be scored if they successfully ride on the bull for 8 seconds. A ride is scored from 0 to 100 points. You will get 0 points if you fail the 8-second ride. The bull and the rider will both receive a score up to 50 points each. The combined score would tally up to 100 points. The majority of professional rodeo riders score from the mid-70s to the high 80s. Is it dangerous? Yes, bull riding is quite a dangerous sport. It has been recorded that at least 21 professional bull riders have been mauled to death since 1989. The true numbers are probably way higher than this since these statistics do not include amateur bull riders. And yeah, bull riding can be fatal and it is really common for riders to get severely injured.
I'll be doing parkour. So about parkour, parkour is a sport of moving swiftly through an area, mostly in urban environments by jumping, running, and climbing. Tools needed for parkour are shoes with a flat sole for landing on roofs easier, I think, and toe bumpers so that you don't get blisters easily. Bring some water for hydration and snacks for breaks. Gloves for beginners usually for grip, and a handbook also for beginners. How to practice with parkour is by having necessary equipment, first of all, for parkour, buying comfortable clothes, and finding a group to help motivate and help, since jumping roof to roof can be dangerous. Start small. Go somewhere to train for body strength and practice shoulder rolls, and pick a spot around 3 feet high to practice jumps. There's no clear statistic about how much deaths there were. So yeah.
I'm Sabrina, and I'll talk about cage diving today. Cave diving, sorry. Cave diving is underwater diving in water-filled caves. It may be done as an extreme sport, a way of exploring flooded caves for scientific investigation, or for the search for divers lost while diving. The equipment used varies depending on the circumstances and ranges from breath hold to surface supplied, but almost all cave diving is done using scuba equipment. Compared to caving and scuba diving, there are relatively few practitioners for cave diving. This is due in part to the specialized equipment and skill sets required, and in part because of the high potential risks due to specific environment. Why is cave diving dangerous? Cave diving is one of the most challenging and potentially dangerous kinds of diving or caving. Caves often contain sand, mud, clay, silt, and other sediment that can further reduce underwater visibility in seconds when stirred up. Caves can carry strong water currents, and most common emergencies for cave divers are equipment issues like torches flooding, reels tangling, masks breaking, or navigational problems. But more serious situations are also very likely to occur, like gear failure, getting lost, becoming trapped, or running out of air.
Ice climbing. So what is ice climbing? Ice climbing is the activity of extending an inclined ice formation. Usually ice climbing refers to ropes and protected climbing of features such as ice walls, frozen waterfalls, and cliffs and rock slabs covered with ice refrozen from flows of water. Generally, this means that many ice climbers will be climbing or scaling large surfaces that are covered with frozen water, otherwise known as ice, that is of a particular level of stiffness. Because there's something special about ice climbing, and you have to learn about this to get into ice climbing, is that when you do ice climbing, you have to be very careful with the type of surfaces of which you are scaling, because there are sections of surfaces that when you do try to scale them, you might not be scaling the right type of ice. And what I mean by the right type of ice is basically how ice forms, and the way that the ice forms is generally usually the same. However, like the density and how should I put it? How compact the ice is, or how unmelted the ice is, can usually affect how well this ice is going to be climbable. That's because sometimes when you climb these sort of ice formations, you can generally see that it's very good. That's because how ice climbers will usually climb these is that they usually have anchors and zip and lines all around these places. Okay, a second. So basically, with ice climbing, especially with these sort of things, alpine, there's many different kind of environments of which people can take for ice climbing, and the ice can be divided into, well, two spheres, as it's going to say down here. There's alpine ice and there's water ice. Alpine ice is usually found in mountainous environments, and these usually require you to climb them to reach a summit of a mountain, while water ice is usually found from a cliff or other outcroppings beneath water flow. And basically what this means is that what's different from alpine ice and water ice is that water ice was, of course, formed from water. I mean, that's kind of obvious when you think about ice. However, flowing water that was frozen over is what I'm trying to say. While alpine ice is mainly formed from more of precipitation. So, for example, maybe it snowed in that area, and then maybe it rained in that area and it froze over. However, the difference mainly between those two is kind of just like how it formed, if you wanted to put it that way. I understand that they both do form from ice. However, the main difference is how it formed. Next slide. So rope systems. When you're climbing when you're doing ice climbing, you usually have multiple different types of rope systems of which people will employ. This is mainly to ensure that the ice climber doesn't fall to their deaths and kill themselves. However, that does not mean that ice climbing is not a dangerous sport, because what ice climbing is still extremely dangerous due to the fact that with ice climbing, you have to be climbing, well, you're scaling a cliff, if you would want to say that. You're basically sailing a long height. And the dangerous part about that is that if you were to do, maybe if something were to break, so for example, if you lose your grip on your ice pick, or let's say one of your shoes loses its grip on the ice, what would then end up happening is that you would slip on the ice and you could possibly fall down a long distance, which is not very good for your bodily fluids and your insides. So, as I've already mentioned, there are three primary rope systems. There's the single rope, double rope, and twin rope. Single rope is usually suited for climbing straight climbing routes. That basically means vertically straight climbing. That means that you're not really going to left or to the right too much. You're mainly just scaling yourself up the wall instead of going like maybe diagonally. If you are going diagonally, you could use the double rope system, which is more flexible. There's also something called the twin rope system, which actually uses two twin ropes in a single rope system. And this is used for multi-pitch routes. And that basically means that what multi-pitch basically means is that you're pitching multiple times, where basically you're moving one side, moving the other side, and you're just moving around a lot, if you want to put it that way. And the double and twin rope techniques are more frequently used because these systems are more redundant, and the number of sharp edges on the ice basically with these rope systems, it gives the ice climber more control and more ability to ensure that he is not putting himself into a position of which he does not want to put himself in. And these rope systems, what's very good about them is that there are a lot of things of which people will usually try to say about these rope systems. And some people do actually prefer the twin rope system, but many people try to go with the single rope system. Next slide. And for my final slide, I'll be talking about the safety mechanisms. As I've already mentioned, ice climbing is a very dangerous sport, and safety is a key part of ice climbing. Today, there are multiple different types of safety mechanisms of which are used for ice climbers. However, some of them are, as you can see here, some of them are the the ice screw. And so basically ice screws are hollow tube with sharp teeth in the front end. And basically what these are is kind of, you just like, you hit them into the ice to make sure that you got like a, how should I put it, an anchor in the ice. And this basically ensures that you can still have control while you're climbing up the mountain or the waterfall of which you're climbing up. And these usually provide a very strong protection in solid ice because of how ice is very random, if you would say. The strength of the ice screw appointments can vary greatly. However, usually ice screws are used to ensure that the ice climber has more control and more safety while climbing up. There's also a technique which is called a V-thread and an ice bollard. And a V-thread is basically where two intersecting tunnels are bored into the ice. So basically, like two intersecting tunnels are bored into the ice, a V shape. And a sling is like basically sent through the tunnel and tied in a loop. So basically, this is kind of like a how should I put it? Basically, you're sending a hole through and then you're sending a string through as well. And what this will basically do is that it ensures that you have a much more safe and a lot more of basically an anchor point with your string and your rope. And this string of which is left behind inside that V shape will also be left behind as a anchor point, and make sure that you can come back and use this later, possibly to attach some of your lines to. An ice bollard, as I've already mentioned before, is chipped away in a teardrop of shaped of a bollard, and a sling is placed around it. So basically, you're kind of like making a bollard, and then you're basically putting your rope around it. And what this will basically do is that while your sling or your rope is attached to it, it basically makes sure that your sling can stay there, and it ensures that you also have another safety feature for you. Not only that, there are also natural formations, ice hooks, and ice pistons, of which are also used as protection for ice climbers. However, the most common ones of which people really do use are the V-thread, along with the ice bollard, and of course also ice screws. These are the main three of which you really want to know about, as these are probably some of the most essential tactics and the most essential things of which you must learn in order to protect yourself during ice climbing, as it is a very dangerous sport. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Eric, and I'll be doing volcano surfing. Okay, so volcano surfing is basically sandboarding, but on a volcano. Sandboarding is when you take a surfboard, you go onto a sand dune and then surf down the side of the dune. So the volcano surfers use a surfboard to surf down the side of a volcano, and usually they go on the side that's usually covered with ash or like tiny volcanic pebbles, which feels similar to surfing on sand. They wouldn't do it on like rock because that's not really surfing anymore. But sometimes they surf on active volcanoes, which is basically doing it on inactive volcanoes, except it has lava and toxic gases, which just add another factor of danger. And basically, yeah, they just hike up the volcano or ride a helicopter to the top and then surf down. Next slide, please. Volcano surfing has dangers, and that includes like falling, getting cut by the sharp volcanic ash. Yeah, they're like little pebbles. So breathing in the poisonous gases on an active volcano, or getting hit by molten lava, or contracting histoplasmosis, which is a fungal disease and affects the lungs and causes chest pain and makes it hard to breathe. It's also called Caver's disease or something. For protective gear, for volcano surfing, usually people wear like goggles, jumpsuits, knee pads, armor, or like masks. the goggles protect against the ash and like gases. The jumpsuits protect you if you fall. Same with the knee pads and armor. The masks protect you against the gas, the poisonous gases. Surprisingly, there hasn't been any recorded deaths, but there has been a lot of accidents, mainly involving those on active volcanoes. For example, some guy like got hit by molten lava, so that wasn't really great. And here are some images of people volcano surfing. They're surfing on a surfboard down a volcano. Yeah.